I'm going to be speaking to Felipe Rodriguez, who's the program lead for heavy-duty vehicles on the International Council on Clean Transportation, about changes that are coming to the European Union's heavy-duty trucking CO2 emission regulations. And welcome to the interview, Felipe.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Now, the review starts next year, and my understanding is that the idea is to not only reduce CO2 emissions from trucking, which is a significant portion of transportation emissions, but also the intent is to, over a period maybe of the next decade, transition the industry over to battery electric or hydrogen electric trucks. Have I got that correct?
Yes, that is right. So the European Commission has set a precedent already this year, earlier in the summer, with light-duty vehicles. So for light-duty vehicles, they are proposing a complete phase-out of combustion engines by 2035. That is 100% CO2 reduction in tailpipe emissions. This is the way that the Commission has to force the phase-out of combustion engines. So for next year, we're expecting a similar proposal coming by likely the end of 2022. And what we're looking forward to see there is also a 100% reduction target for trucks. The date of this, it is yet uncertain, but for it to be aligned with the climate neutrality goals of the European Commission, shouldn't be any later than 2040.
So I imagine to some extent, the state of the technology will dictate the timing of moving to zero emissions. The note in the press release that in 5 years, the 5-year total cost of ownership of battery electric trucks is expected to be lower than combustion trucks within the next decade. And I think probably you could say the same thing for hydrogen. It'll be pretty close. So is that the case, that the technology will dictate to some extent how quickly this can be done?
That is correct. So when you talk to manufacturers are ready to move as quickly as possible with production plans. So right now, if you want to buy one of these trucks, it is not yet available. So manufacturers are gearing up to be able to set up the production facilities to start producing these vehicles at scale. But that is one side of the equation, right? So this is, let's say, a 3-component equation. So the supply of the vehicles is going to be needed. And this is exactly what the CO2 standards target. Manufacturers have made ambitious commitments to the decarbonization of their fleets. And now what the CO2 standards need to do is secure those commitments in the form of a regulation, of an enforceable regulation. But there are other elements. So the infrastructure as well, this is going to be key in enabling the transition. And for that, there is another piece of regulation called the Alternative Fuel Infrastructure Regulation that is being proposed that would mandate the deployment of these charging hubs and refueling stations for hydrogen. And then we have the demand component, which is perhaps these policies that are targeted to the operators of these vehicles to make sure that they can also benefit from this transition. So while we see that the TCO is likely to be there, this total cost of ownership, there's more needed for it to happen from the infrastructure and the vehicle supply for it to materialize in the next few years.
Felipe, I've interviewed experts in North America about this issue, and they tell me that the industry itself is fairly eager to move over to electric. They think that will lower costs, and then it has all sorts of other knock-on benefits. Is that the case in Europe as well?
That is certainly the case. So you have, well, these manufacturers are global players to begin with. So what you hear in North America, for example, from DTNA, Daimler Trucks North America, is very similar to what you hear from Daimler Europe as well over here. The same goes to, for example, Navistar, which is now part of the Traton family of the Volkswagen company, right? Also owning Scania and MAN. So the ambition is very similar across the both continents. Most ambitious is perhaps Daimler, that they have set 100% what they call carbon-free, I believe, vehicle fleet by 2039, which in practice, this means zero-emission tailpipe. So This is a very ambitious target, and then other manufacturers are also committing to this ambition. For example, Scania that has already set on a pathway for battery electric trucks. So they say like fuel cell is not really our thing. We believe in battery electric, and the whole Traton group, that is Scania, MAN, and perhaps Navistar, are moving in that direction as well with these ambitious targets.
Felipe, I wonder if you could give me your perspective on a question that I often ask transportation experts when I interview them, and that is the pace of change within the auto industry. I mean, it was, like in 2018-ish somewhere, people were saying, well, no, it'll be changes coming, but it'll be in the 2030s and into the 2040s. And then all of a sudden, battery prices dropped, and automakers started investing tens of billions into the retooling factories, building battery factories. I mean, it just, some experts, it's almost like it came out of nowhere. It is just a very rapid change. What's your take on that for the heavy duty side of the industry?
Yeah, I think this is a matter of survival also for these companies to be able to adapt to the challenges from climate change and to be part of the solution in terms of climate action. And I think there has been a lot of changes in leadership from these companies, from these large truck manufacturers, and many of these new CEOs and new directors for the brands have come with ambitious targets to move it towards zero emission vehicles. So the heavy duty vehicle will benefit from the economies of scale that are happening in the light duty vehicle sector. For example, if you look at the rapidly declining cost of batteries, this is definitely something that is going to enable the transition for battery electric trucks as well. And so it is very promising what we're seeing in the speed at which these gigafactories are being developed to produce battery cells at a large scale. And that despite the commodity prices challenges that we had in 2021, we still saw a price reduction compared to 2020. It went from $140 per kilowatt hour to $132 per kilowatt hour, according to Bloomberg New Energy Finance. So this is very promising, and we expect that this decline is going to continue, and definitely manufacturers will be able to benefit from these economies of scale and learning by doing effects.
What about the users of these trucks, the long haul trucking companies? There's some adaptation required on their part. They need different maintenance staff, repair staff. They need to put in infrastructure, like charging infrastructure, that sort of thing. Are they eager to embrace electric trucks and hydrogen trucks?
Well, some of them are. So the ICCT, for example, were the technical observers to an alliance called the European Clean Trucking Alliance, which is a demand-side organization collecting a lot of these progressive companies, shippers, freight forwarders, carriers that are looking to transition quicker than the rest of the market. But it is the transport business is very, very tight. So the profit margins are very small. And many of these actors are really do not want to take risks, do not want to be the first movers. And this is something that needs to be addressed with policy. So in our analysis, we see that incentive mechanisms for these, let's say, progressive fleets could really benefit the transition, providing a lot of carrots that can be financed by the stick that you can put on the diesel vehicles, right? So this a polluter pays principle that is behind a lot of the European regulation. We believe that can create incentives to kickstart the market in the next few years, creating that ecosystem that is needed to prevent the disruption that it is unavoidable to a certain extent, right? So the charging infrastructure will need to be developed. The driving patterns will need to be adapted, like the dwell time for charging will need to be included into the operations. It is a transformation of the industry, and definitely fleets, carriers, freight forwarders, shippers need to be part of that solution.
Well, Felipe, thank you very much for this. Very insightful. I really appreciate it.
Great. Thank you very much as well.